and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. This is episode 33. In today's episode, I'll be sharing with you the 5 steps to build emotional intimacy and have a happier marriage this year. Now, this is the first under the theme for February 2023, if you're listening to this much later. And the theme of this month is intimacy and physical connection. Intimacy and physical connection. And so week 2, we're going to talk about creating physical intimacy in a busy life. Week 3, exploring new ways to connect physically. And week 4, maintaining a strong physical connection over time. That is what is to come. So make sure you subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on any of the future episodes. Now, if you missed any of the past episodes, let me strongly encourage you to bookmark this podcast so you can quickly access the past shows. And last month's theme in January 2023, for those who are listening, I mentioned before in a much later time, was communication and conflict resolution, which started at episode 28 and then 29, 30, and 32. Now, 31 was a special interview, which is a must listen. And that's all I'll say. You've got to check it out to know what 31 was about and why I skipped it in the sequence from 28 to 32. Now, if you're listening for the first time, let me say this. You may or may not agree with all that you hear. And quite frankly, I don't expect you to. That's quite okay, because you might be triggered by some of what you'll hear on this episode. But remember, that is one of the purpose of this show. Stir things up, bring things from a different angle from what you've been hearing. It's not the same old. People are regurgitating what they hear or read on the internet. No, you're getting it fresh and direct. And that's why it may sound different. It may sound contrarian. It may go against the grain of what you've been taught or heard in the past. So I encourage you that if that happens, remember, I told you, number 1, number 2, you can always leave a comment or send an email to us and discuss and let us know. We want to dialogue. We want to hear you, and any ideas you have, please send that our way. Now, this show is brought to you by KingsleyGrant.com, and our hope is that you will be challenged, inspired, and encouraged in this episode as in every other episode. Stay tuned.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage World? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. Today, we're talking about the 5 steps to build emotional intimacy and have a happier marriage this year. Just to remind you that you can also watch a shorter episode. If you want to watch a video of this topic, you can watch a shorter clip on my YouTube channel at Kingsley Grant. You will find my shorts, but also a short video on this topic or other topics that I have there as well. And make sure when you do go there, smash the subscribe button, click on the like button, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss out on any new video broadcast. You can also watch my shorter versions of this on TikTok if you so desire, and make sure you follow me there as well at Kingsley Grant. I have also some exciting things in the works that I'll be sharing with you real soon. And that is, I am working on a deck of cards, playing cards for couples entitled Connect and Communicate. Now, these cards are designed to help you and your partner connect in a deeper and more intimate way. They're fun, they're interactive, there are open-ended questions, they give you a chance to dialogue. It's almost like you are having your own therapy session in like a do-it-yourself way, and basically in a very, in an environment that you're going to create with the card suggestion, where you can have some conversations, have some fun, but also have some deeper connection and dialogue about topics that you may not be talking about on a regular basis, and the cards are designed with that in mind. I'm also working on a new ebook that's titled Happier Marriage Secrets. Unlock the secrets that reignite passion and intimacy into your marriage, even if it's struggling right now. As you can see, a lot is going on in my world, right? But I want to make sure you get a special gift and get as much value that I can bring you. And this special gift I have for you at the end of this episode, that's going to be free. You'll get that just for listening to the full episode of this podcast. So make sure whatever you do to stick around to the end to hear how to get the gift. Again, let me simply say thanks for joining me for this episode. As you've already heard, we're talking about 5 steps to build emotional intimacy and have a happier marriage this year. Now, some people may have different ideas of what emotional intimacy is like. They hear the word emotional and intimacy, and sometimes it may bring confusion because sometimes they go right away to the physical intimacy side of things. Now, we've covered that in one of the future episode of this theme on this month, but I want to talk more about the emotional connection, where we connect emotionally. And many marriages, in my work as a marriage and family therapist of over 30 plus years, and having been a licensed and marriage therapist for basically almost 2 decades, worked with so many people in couples on different aspects of their relationships. And I've experienced these things both professionally and personally. Now, I believe that when I talk about emotional intimacy, I'm bringing that to you from a very experienced position, a very professional position, and I would say an expertise position. And so when I mention about emotional intimacy, just to be clear of what I'm talking about is how do you connect basically around the heart, right? Around the heart, not the physical aspect of things, even though emotional intimacy does lead to that. Not about the cognitive, the kind of head kind of relationship that some people have, using their logic and their rational, and there's a time for that. But how to connect emotionally. So the very first point of the 5 steps, the first step, this is the most important of all the steps. Actually, every other step builds on this one. This one, you've got to make sure you get it right. It has to be put in place, because if this number 1 is not in place, then everything else is going to be very, very difficult to interact, to experience, because it requires this number 1 to have emotional intimacy. So what is that? And that here it is. Create an emotional safe space. Create an emotional safe space. This is critical. This is vital. This is so important. You hear my emphasis. By now, you understand how important this is. See, by creating this environment, this safe space, you and your partner can have a chance to speak, to feel more comfortable in sharing your feelings. That means you're going to have a space where you set up parameters. You set up, rules of engagement. You set up the things that are like must not do kind of things, right? In this space is where you're going to have a chance to speak. It's going to a chance where you're going to be listening to each other. You're going to have a chance. And that's why I want to encourage you to listen to the last few episodes, because I cover some of these things in those episodes about active listening, about empathy. These are the ingredients that make up this emotional safe space, because you must feel comfortable. Your partner must feel comfortable to share their feelings, right? So you're going to take away any criticism that would normally come, interruptions that would come, disrespect that would come. Those things have to be removed from this environment, right? They have to vacate this environment. It has to be a clean sweep where you set up the parameters, you set up what is going to be possible when you do have you meet for any dialogue. An emotional safe space is critical. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Maybe if you don't know exactly how to set that up, you may want to actually get a third party, a therapist, or do some research on your part, right? Some due diligence. Actually, if you listen to my last episodes, you'll find I cover some of these things as well. So by now, if you've been listening, you have an idea of what goes into this emotional safe space. Okay. Number 2, practice vulnerability. Now, this is not as easy as it sounds, and you might just be bowing your head as you listen to this, right? Because you might be in a relationship where when you've been vulnerable or tried to be vulnerable, that vulnerability was taken advantage of. Or maybe you are from a school of thought that being vulnerable is weakness, especially from a husband's standpoint. He may see that if I'm being vulnerable, I might be taken advantage of, or it may show weakness. And so we hold on to our vulnerability. I know for me, being vulnerable has not been easy. It's a work in progress. I'm still working on this. I'm a whole lot better now than I was before because I'm from a culture, as you may hear my accent, from Jamaica. And in my culture, men especially were not encouraged to be vulnerable. It's, when I saw women, and I guess this is universal, where women are a lot more vulnerable with each other than men are with other men. And so we had to show this hard kind of tough boy, tough guy, posture. And so vulnerability didn't come easy for me from a cultural and a socialized way for men in our world. So vulnerability is something that has to be intentional, especially for you as a husband. Now, you as a wife, you may find it a lot much easier because it's something you probably have been doing for many years. Whereas for us, we haven't. We kind of hold that close to our chest because that's our tough part of us, right? So we've got to have a chance to practice vulnerability, sharing our fears and our insecurities. That is something that we don't want to, especially again, as husbands. We should not look like we're fearful. We should be strong. Again, that's a socialized norm that we've been handed. But it's important for us in marriage to talk about our fears, because sometimes, I would say most times, it's sensed. Your wife, husband, can sense there's something there, but don't know what it really is, and may not realize that you have feelings too. I just did a video, and you may want to see that on YouTube, where it's called "Husband Have Feelings Too." Okay, husband have feelings too. You may want to watch that video because I cover some of these ideas of the fears and insecurities. So you want to practice vulnerability, and that's why when I say having an emotional safe space is so important, because imagine trying to be vulnerable in an unsafe space. It's not going to be healthy, and it may not work. It may backfire. And that's why I mentioned the importance of having an emotional safe space to practice vulnerability, which is sharing your own fears, your insecurities. And I believe vulnerability is a door to intimacy, is a key for closer relationships. So practice vulnerability. Number 3, show interest in your partner's, the things he or she likes. I cannot tell you how many couples I've worked with and have heard this idea that, I'm not interested in what he does, and he's not interested in what I do. And so it's almost like two different worlds, two single people living their own lives and doing their own things. Now, I'm not saying that you should both like all the same things, but try to find one thing about an interest or a hobby that you both could share together. Make an effort. This is where intentionality, this is where a sacrifice, this is where you're going to have to kind of let your foot off the gas a little bit to say, okay, I may not be as interested as you are, but I could show some interest. I could make an effort. I can do some things that you are interested in. For example, some of my wives, and I think this is true for most women and wives, and that is going shopping, right? Or walking the mall. Now, I have no interest in that. It's something that I see as, I just am I being honest and being vulnerable here, a waste of time. I just like, oh my goodness, to go and walk around and from store to store and spend time. And I just go in, get what I want and get out. No, not so my wife. She'll go in. And I see this true about many other women as well. I've heard this as well. And when I go to the mall, sometimes it's interesting to see the husbands. They may hold the bags sitting outside waiting for their wives who have gone into the store and taking their time, and they're sitting there on their phone, and you can watch your body language, like the sides and the glance, looking to see when will she ever come out of that store. But at times I'll show interest and I'll make an effort to do that because she's interested in that. I'll make an effort and a sacrifice, even it's not something that I'm truly, interested in, but I'll do it. And at times she'll do the very same thing for me. So it's where we're going to have to give and take and make some compromise. But we got to show interest if we're going to be able to build emotional intimacy. Remember now, it's building emotional intimacy. If we're going to have a happier marriage, it's just a give and take. It can't just be all that I want or all that my wife wants or all that you want and all that your partner wants. It have to be a compromise. And at some point, you've got to show interest in the other person's, whether it's a hobby or what they're interested in. Make an effort. Even if you have to fake it at first, fake it until you make it. Okay. Number 4, practice gratitude. This is a very interesting one, a very important one, I should say, about practicing gratitude, expressing appreciation and recognition for your partner's efforts and contributions. I cannot tell you how important this is, that especially I hear from husbands mostly. I do hear from wives from time to time, but I've heard from husbands who would say, I feel so unappreciated. I feel as if I cannot do enough, and then never hear from my wife that there's an appreciation. And they will say, I feel very unappreciated. So if you're going to build emotional intimacy, we've got to show gratitude to our partner, recognizing the small things and the big things. Show appreciation for the small things and the big things. If your husband or your wife brings you coffee and makes you coffee or breakfast, or, do something that you would normally be the one doing as your role, based upon how you've divided your role in the household, and he and she kind of stepped over and did something on that you would normally do, or vice versa. How often have you just said, thank you, I truly appreciate that? The thought behind some of what I've heard is, well, why should I say thank you? That's his duty. That's her duty. And isn't that what we do as a husband and wife? We teamwork. Why am I saying thank you? Why? Because you want to build emotional intimacy, not because it's, expected that this is what they should do, but everyone wants at least every now and then to know that what they've done is appreciated and acknowledged, and it's seen. That's human nature. Human nature. So I want to encourage you, and if you have not been practicing this, it's going to feel awkward at first, because you're going to have this resistance that says, why should I do that? Why should I say thank you? Why should I say I appreciate? That's what they should do. No, I want to encourage you to fight the resistance and practice gratitude. Even if you think he or she does not deserve, because you're having some issues, you're in conflict, practice it anyway. It's 2 separate things. Both can coexist at the same time. Gratitude and conflict. Because what happened is, when you practice gratitude, it will somehow have a work on the conflict indirectly and maybe directly. And this is another way to build emotional intimacy. So before I give you the 5th one, I want to cover again the first 4. Create an emotional safe space. I cannot say how important that is. Practice vulnerability. Show interest in your partner's hobbies and interests. Practice gratitude. Now, before I share the 5th one, again, remember to subscribe to the show, leave a review, and a rating is very important to do that. And also make sure that you go to happiermarriagesecrets.com, happiermarriagesecrets.com, and watch and listen to the past episodes as well. The fifth step in building emotional intimacy for this year is make time for intimacy. It's a Kingsley, that sound, well, that's like implied. Well, yeah, yeah, because this is where it's going to take you into a very intentional way. Now, all the things I've described, right? Emotional safe space. You've got to make time to create that. Practice vulnerability. Got to make time. Show interest. You got to make time. Practice gratitude. So when I say make time for intimacy, I'm talking about how you're, this is requiring both physical and emotional. Now, I'll cover the physical aspect of intimacy in a future episode, but let me just say for this episode that you make time for both physical and emotional. And sometimes it may look like scheduling these things, regular date nights, special moments together. When I finish my playing cards, you may want to schedule a time just to get together and pick a card and talk through those things. That's making time for intimacy. See, how I like to describe and define intimacy is this way. Intimacy simply says, into me and see. Into me and see. You're inviting the person into your world, into your life to see what really you're about, to really listen to your person's heart. And that's why it's when I say make time, because you're not going to find time to do these things. You have to make time for it because, as you know, life is very busy. When I do the episode about how to do this in a busy life, we'll cover more about that in that episode. But just to suffice for this episode, I want to encourage you, make time. Carve out time in your schedule. Make this a priority because your relationship matters. And if you're going to have a happier marriage than this year, these are 5 steps that must be followed. Again, here are the 5 steps. Create an emotional safe space, practice vulnerability, show interest, practice gratitude, and make time for intimacy. My friend, these 5 steps will truly set your marriage on a path, on a trajectory for a happier, long-lasting marriage. And if that's what you really want, I'd love to hear which of these 5 stood out most to you, or which of these 5 you're going to put into practice. What was most helpful to you in what you heard today? Make sure you comment wherever you see this podcast is promoted on social media, and also send us an email. And you can leave a review for the show that tell me what your thoughts were on Apple Podcasts. That's a great place to leave a review, and I would really appreciate that. Now, remember now, by simply staying to the end, which you have, if you're listening right now, you did stay to the end. I had this gift that the announcer will tell you how to get your copy of this free ebook, 5 Secrets to Your Happier Marriage, the roadmap to the marriage you've always wanted and so deserve. Right? And also she will tell you how to stay in touch with us. Before she comes, let me invite you to check out our new website at happiermarriagesecrets.com, where you will find all the podcasts in one place and also our blog posts. So thanks again for listening. And the announcer will now tell you how to get your free gift I promised you at the beginning for staying until the end. Now let's make marriages happier again. And here is the announcer.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1. Make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2. Subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3. Get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.